So you probably won't know this, but about 3 or 4 years ago, my grandmother sadly got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Obviously, I was quite young at the time, so I didn't really know how to cope with it, and that's why I've made this documentary to help people of my generation and just people generally of any generation to help cope with that sort of loved one being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So as you can imagine, it was quite hard for me because I was 14, 15 about at that time. I didn't really know what Alzheimer's was. To me, Alzheimer's at the time was just you forget things and that's it. But it's much more than that. And in this documentary, I really want to get across how people felt and how they've been affected by it. So I just hope it can help other people out there too. So not only do I want to get across how people felt, I also want to tell you my story with it and how it affected me. Because gradually over the time I learnt more and more about Alzheimer's and how it worked, I guess. It sort of went from being the unknown to me to sort of being I'm experiencing it firsthand, and it was to a degree upsetting to see because that person was going. In my mind, they were there, but not really, if you know what I mean. Like, they didn't really understand what was going on, but neither did I really. I just wanted to so from ages like I said 14 to 15 onwards to the age I am now, 18, I sort of gradually experienced how her Alzheimer's, my grandmother's Alzheimer's got worse. So it was hard for me to sort of digest how it worked, because I at the time I sort of just didn't get it. Like, there was I like, before going to see her, I got told that she's going to forget things and like forget that she's asked certain questions and stuff like that. But there's a difference between being told and actually experiencing it. So I guess sort of when I got asked the same sort of question like over and over and over again, it was sort of confusing to me as why she couldn't remember my answer. Yeah, in like I said, in the documentary, I want to get across how people felt. I want to get across how I felt as well, which I've just told you. So we're going to be interviewing my family members to see how they coped with the situation, I guess. So first of all, thank you, Dad, for taking the time to answer my questions. I guess I'll just go straight into it.
Okay.
The first one I've got is what does the word Alzheimer's mean to you?
For me, Alzheimer's means loss of a person, and while it can mean different things to different people, for me, it's either the end or the beginning of the loss of that person.
How How did you find coping with it on the whole?
Um,
I mean, obviously it wasn't easy. But...
no, it wasn't easy. It was quite difficult. And I thought I fully understood everything, but you don't realise that it impacts things totally differently and not in the way you expect. So one early example was my mother, Mamgu,
Yeah.
would make the finest cawl in the world. Now, cawl is Welsh broth.
Yeah.
And I always remember one day going to visit, and she had all the ingredients for the cawl in the fridge, but she didn't know how to make cawl anymore. And that was horrible. And
Yeah.
she'd bought the ingredients, but she didn't know what to do with it. And that was the first
Was
time.
That first sort of sign?
No, there were signs earlier, but that was the first sign that really impacted me and actually really upset me. And then the other times was that it frustrated me. And then you get frustrated by what's said. And as you know, there were times when my mother was quite nasty towards me.
Yeah.
I remember journeys in the car with you in the back, and she was calling me Fester, which I know is funny now because, no hair and everything. Yeah. And I know it wasn't Mam, but at the time when it's constant, yeah, it's quite difficult to deal with. And some of my regrets then, now, looking back, are I let it get to me.
Yeah.
And then laughter as well, losing her in Carmarthen Market, remember?
Yeah.
And all I was thinking about was, oh my God, how am I going to tell my brothers and sister, yeah, that I've lost our mother? But luckily, with your help, yeah, we found her, and we found her buying yet another Welsh rugby jersey to add to the many Welsh rugby jerseys she had.
Should have been the first place we looked.
Probably, if we thought about it.
To a degree, it almost felt like when we went out with her, it was just sort of, we were kind of taking a stranger out. That's what it felt like, because she wasn't really there. And then there was sort of certain times where she'd just get snappy with us, like, because she didn't understand sort of that we were trying to help her, but that's not what she wanted to do. So sort of linking to that previous question, do you have any coping mechanisms?
For me, personally, it's remembering all the wonderful times, but also for coping with my mental health, it's open air, it's being outside, it's fresh air, and also for me it's about mindfulness as well, about taking you away somewhere. And I have a few things I do to do that, but now that Mam is gone, it's the memories, and it's daft little things. So I'm converting an old Land Rover into a camper van, and to me, having Mam and Dad's name as part of that, yeah, will stay with, because Mam would have loved it. I remember we've been camping, and Auntie Sharon would bring Mam down, and she'd sit down with a glass of wine and would love our tent, and would love the rooftop tent, and try and climb up the ladder. So I just know my mother and my father would love what we're doing. Yeah. And I think they're in shop behind. That's a picture. Yeah. That's how I remember them, even though that was before I was born. But yeah, that's another way. That's how I try and cope with it.
Do you think there needs to be more awareness towards Alzheimer's?
Yeah, certainly. We're all, well, many of us are aware of this word, and also there's confusion. There's dementia, there's Alzheimer's, there's vascular dementia, there's what. But at the end of the day, to me, it's dementia or Alzheimer's one thing.
Yeah.
And it can affect many different people, and it really affects the families of the people, the loved ones, neighbours, etc. I always remember going with my mother places and feeling as if I would have to explain her behaviours to people. Now, lots of people understood. They gave you that knowing look, and they would fully engage with my mother. Other people just thought, there's an odd lady.
Yeah.
I think if people were more aware, then it's like any disability. Sometimes if you see a physical disability, it's much easier to understand that that person has a disability. But with Alzheimer, a lot of the time, you look like a perfectly a normal person without the disability, without Alzheimer's, and then they see it. So yes, I think people should be more aware.
Do you think being affected by it has opened your eyes to it more?
Absolutely, because we were affected by it with Dad first, and I remember going through the same thing. I remember getting to the point where we had to stop him from driving, and that was his life. And then lo and behold, 10-15 years later, going through the same process with my mother, and having to not lie, but having to try and explain to her why we had to take a license away from her because the doctor had said so. And there was just no explaining. And that's another example of the difficult moments we had with her. But then on the plus side, I remember my mother always tried to speak to me in Welsh, but I remember my mother saying to me a number of times, oh, damn it all, I can't remember what I was going to say now. This blinking Alzheimer's, or this bloody Alzheimer's. So she was aware she had Alzheimer's, but she would get quite frustrated sometimes. Other times she would laugh at herself. I'm not sure I've answered that question, but anyway.
What was the hardest thing about the experience of being affected by it?
I think it's seeing your loved one slowly disappear. And she's always there, and she was always there. And I remember wonderful moments when my mother always loved going out. Every time I'd walk in the door, or we'd walk in the door, like, where are we going?
Yeah.
Let's go down the Mumbles. Let's go and have Joe's ice cream. And you think, oh gosh, I've just driven for 2 hours, and then jump in the car. And then towards the end, there were times she didn't want to go out. And of course, the other thing was every time we were in the car and we played music, my mother would would dance to whatever the song was, whether she knew the words or not, and then she would play the piano on the dashboard. So yes, it's that's losing. It's not the person that lose. It's like the personality, the soul, which actually is the person, isn't it?
Yeah. Were there any times you thought you completely lost that person?
Oh yes. My father, definitely. Maybe the last 18 months of his life, it wasn't Dad. And I always remember I would go and visit him because he had to go into care, and I went and visited him, and I would sit there for an hour and a half with him and talk. How are you? What have you been up to? And he had nothing, no reaction. And I remember once I walked in and I asked him how he felt, and he looked at me with anger in his eyes and he said, with my bloody hands. And then he shut down. But that one line was wonderful. With my bloody hands. It's like as if I was asking him the stupidest question in the world. How do you feel? I was like, I feel with my hands. What's wrong with you, son? But yes, so there was a point in time that I lost Dad. Now with my mother, it was different because we never fully lost her because unfortunately COVID took her in the end. But there were times, so there was never that time I felt I lost my mother until, of course, she passed away due to COVID.
What do you think the government could do to cater better for Alzheimer's?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to money. So I think we need better care facilities. We probably want to look at um, early diagnosis of Alzheimer's. For instance, I'm 55. Maybe the signs are there now with me. Maybe there's stuff I can do now. Excuse me. Maybe there was things that we could have done for mum and dad. Now, in 5 years, 10 years time, there might be drugs coming out. But I would also look at informing the public about Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
so that they have a better idea on Alzheimer's. Certainly.
The last question now. Do you have a favourite memory of Mamgu or Dadki?
Blinking egg. I always remember on holiday in West Wales, and I always remember we would turn up to the campsite, and we would always stay with our cousins. So that our cousins had an old army tent, and there were sort of 8 of them, and there were 7 of us. And then we got out the car and we get the cricket set out, and we'd start playing cricket with all the other children. And then my dad would always umpire in his army shorts with his sandals and his socks on. And then my mother would then sort everything out, the bedding and everything, because dad had put the tent up. And there's no one memory from that time, but it's that memory of holidays, the summers, the endless summers of spending time either on my mother came from farming families, so we would spend endless summers with either her and dad down on farms, fishing up rivers. And that's the memory, the childhood, that being 8, 9, 10 years old and having them there. And of course, when you're 8, 9, 10, I don't think you truly appreciate your parents.
Yeah.
It's only when you get a little bit older and a little bit wiser and become a parent yourself that you realise the sacrifices they So, both sacrificed. My father fought in the war, my mother nursed for 30 odd years. So the sacrifice they did for us will always be, I'm here now because of my parents. So those are the memories that I have.
So for anyone that doesn't know, Alzheimer's is a neurological disorder that causes the brain to shrink and brain cells to die. There are 4 stages of Alzheimer's, and that's the preclinical, and the first stage is preclinical, where the brain starts showing changes but without any signs of disease. The next one is mild or early stage, which is they display early symptoms like mild forgetfulness. And then the next stage is the moderate stage, which lasts the longest, and it's the memory gets worse and they have trouble doing basic things. And then the last stage is severe or late stage, which is where they become almost immobile and they lose control of certain body parts. After being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, a person on average lives for 8 years but can live up to 20 years. There is currently no cure for Alzheimer's, but there are medicines which reduce symptoms, and obviously, like I said before, support is available if needed. First of all, thank you for being here and taking your time to answer some questions. So I'm just going to go straight into the questions. What does the word Alzheimer's mean to you?
Well, to me, Alzheimer's is a condition that affects the brain. It's a disease of the brain. It's something that my mother suffered from, and my father, he had dementia, so ultimately he suffered from it as well. And over years it can become, people are more confused, or personality changes, mood swings, things that they're normally able to do, it all goes out of the window, even down to making decisions. I think that's the worst, making decisions and other people make decisions for them.
So, on the whole, how did you find coping with being affected by Alzheimer's?
Well, to be honest, because I'm one of 5 and I have 4 siblings, it helped that we were able to discuss things with each other and come to decisions. 2 of us had power of attorney for mental health and well-being, and for the monetary for my mother. But we always discussed everything with the other 3 siblings as well. And I think it would have been worse had you been on your own. Like, it must be awful for
Yeah,
people whose partner suffers with Alzheimer's and you have to make decisions on your own. There is help out there, but it did help to cope with discussions with others. That does help a lot. And there is support with social care, but again, it's something you have to find out for yourself.
yeah. So, sort of linking to that, do you have any sort of coping mechanisms that helped you?
Yeah. Well, again, talking with siblings and talking to other people, that was an immense help. Talking to my own partner, my husband, he was very understanding, and he would make allowances as well, because obviously the person who has Alzheimer's display different characteristics to what they normally would have done. So it's the understanding of other people does help.
Do you think there needs to be more awareness towards Alzheimer's?
Yes, but in a nice sort of way. Things like memory walk. I took part in a memory walk. They advertise this more. And you can put your story out there, and friends and colleagues can read it and think, oh yes. But people like the Alzheimer's Society, they have to keep pushing for all this.
Do you think being affected by Alzheimer's has opened your eyes to it more than before?
Oh, definitely. When you experience it firsthand, and there are some things, sometimes you think, oh, that's unbelievable. I would never have thought that would have happened.
Yeah.
Yes, it certainly opens your eyes. And it's something that you have to deal with.
What was the hardest thing you found about dealing with it?
Well, first of all, the diagnosis. And at the time when my mother was diagnosed, she was coping with life. We had things put in place, carers coming in. The worst time was when coronavirus hit. And we weren't able to do the normal things that you would do, like go down, take her out, she'd have visitors. It was very much worse after coronavirus hit. She couldn't socialize with friends. She couldn't understand. She had no understanding of what was happening, because she had routine. She used to go to daycare at certain times of the week. She'd go to chapel, and all this had gone out of the window. So it was far worse for her then, and for us, but
Yeah.
ultimately for her, it was far worse because of not comprehending. The same thing happened with my father, with that key, because he'd got to the stage where he'd stopped talking, and when you did go to visit him, you didn't know whether he recognized you or not.
Yeah.
And the first thing you'd say is, oh, hiya, Dad, is Sharon here? Remember me? I'm Sharon.
Yeah.
And you'd think there was a little bit of recognition in his eyes,
I
but
certainly.
yes, that's just awful. Losing that person, the
Yeah.
person you've always relied on and loved and depended on.
So I sort of felt like she knew I was one of the grandchildren, but not which one.
No, but that was nice. And I do remember the last time my father ever spoke was he was in hospital, and he hadn't been talking, but Daniel, your cousin Daniel, went to visit him the same time as me, and he'd said, "Oh, do you love me, Dadki?" And my father said, "Of course I do." And those were the last words I heard him speaking, which was lovely. You know, that's a memory I'll treasure. But yeah, it's something you can't predict or depend on anything, because everything is so strange and different. And what it must be for them, it doesn't bear thinking about. You know, I remember my mother used to say about my father, it's like as if he's in a fog. You know, that there's a constant fog there, and he can't come out of the fog.
What do you think the government could do to change, to cater better for Alzheimer's?
Well, they have to put far more into social care and nurses and carers. They have to make things easily accessible for, I mean, you know, we consider ourselves intelligent people, but again, you know, nothing is straightforward. You know, there are forms to download and to fill in, and you know, things have got to be easier, you know, because, you know, I imagine people far older than me and my siblings having to fill out forms and to arrange things. And it just, you know, it's got to be
more simple.
More manageable and more, like, fortunately, Mum was able to access daycare, which when she eventually went there a couple of times, she loved it. And had she been able to go there a couple more times a week.
The final question now, do you have a favourite memory of Mamgu or Dadki?
Well, I have thousands of memories of them, but my mother would come into a room and she'd fill the room. And my abiding memory was on her 80th birthday party. She was the last to leave the dance floor and the last to go to bed. And whenever we went out, "Oh, glass of wine, please," and she'd be there. And most of the photographs I have of her holding a glass of wine or eating food or having cake, tea and cake, always eating and drinking, but that was what she loved. And that's all we've got now are these special memories. But I found that was a help for her as well, was the memories, the photos that she had around her in her home. When she did move into a care home, she had all her family around her, photographs. And you just got to do what you can do. Can't do any more, can you? What do you remember from Mamgu?
Well, I just remember how, like, happy she was all of the time, and like you said, she like filled the room, and it was just, she didn't have to do anything. She was just make it.
And she'd chat and talk to anybody, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
I suppose that's the one thing that with Mamgu, she didn't get as bad as my father, in that she didn't lose ability to speak and to hear.
The social side, because she's, even when she's had it, she still carried on talking to people.
Oh yes, yes, and remembering certain things. It was amazing. You know, I take her back down to where she grew up. Well, you've been there as well.
I think that's maybe what helped as well.
And she would pass all these farms, and she'd know all the names of the farms, you know, and she hadn't lived there for 65, nearly 70 years, but she remembered them all. And that's one of the things that we used to do a lot. We would take her out, you know, give her experiences, then give her back experiences.
Really helps that. I really hope that I somehow helped in any way, to be honest, to get across how people coped with it and how people felt at the time, to maybe even if it hasn't like directly said anything to help you, I still hope that it gives the feeling that you're not alone. And even if you haven't been affected by Alzheimer's, I think I still hope that it's like opened your eyes to how hard it is to deal with it, and how it affects people. And if you have been affected by it, you can go to Alzheimer's Society, their website. You can just Google it, or you can give them a call at 0333 150 3456. Hopefully they can help you. And there's lots of sort of information about Alzheimer's on their website as well. I hope that I've helped anyone in some sort of way. Thank you for watching.